Class is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everybody. You have joined DP Solutions webinar on how to run a successful virtual meeting. We are going to give everyone just a minute to get logged in, and then we'll kick things off.
Thank you, Jill, and thank you everybody for attending today. I think this is a super important topic, getting the most out of virtual meetings. When the pandemic started, I think it's pretty safe to say that everybody, including the people on this call, had to adapt quite a bit. And so I think sort of doing a primer about how you can really get the most out of these virtual meetings, really make them effective. And actually, I find that we can make these meetings better using the technology available to us will really be a benefit to us, not just now, but in the future. So let's talk about it a little bit. So just a little introduction for you. At this time, we're about 3 months into the pandemic. I think it's pretty unlikely that we're going to go back to the way things were. I know when I started in business around 15 years ago, where you would go, some days you would go from office to office to meet clients or business partners or whatever, and you have these business discussions, but also social visits. I remember there were times where, I'm in this building, let's go see Joe or whoever while I'm already here. And just say hello and have these things. Well, that stuff is pretty much done, at least for the time being, and maybe things will get better in the future. But for right now, it's just not the way things are going to be going. So a lot of this has been, some have been able to adapt easily. I feel like for me, somebody who really embraces a lot of this virtual communication technology, the internet. This has not been, in terms of doing the work, very difficult. A lot of things I'm able to do remotely, but others have a much harder time, not just doing these meetings, but mastering the delivery of them, doing them in an effective way where you sound professional, you're able to get things done, use your time, and all of that stuff. So I'm going to share our expertise about making the most out of your virtual meetings. If you're going to do webinars like this one, or maybe you're going to have a client strategy session on the internet, or a sales pitch, or whatever you do, it's really important, I feel, that you use the technology available to you in a really effective way. And it can be done without necessarily, breaking the bank or doing anything super crazy. So for our agenda today, and ultimately, I always say at the end of the day, this is all about you guys and what you need to be effective. So please make sure you have your Q&A. We're going to talk about a number of tips that can help get the best out of your meetings. So items here. So we're going to talk about just a few applications. There's many applications out here, but I want to get you in the mindset about what applications sort of suit what kind of meetings better. I want to talk about things like microphones and audio quality. So when you're having your meeting, you want to come through nice and clear. You want to avoid all that interference and stuff. You don't want to sound too echoey or have background noise. We're going to talk a lot about that. Cameras and lighting. A lot of times when you've probably seen people do virtual meetings and everything's all pixelated or the focus is off or whatever. I want to talk a little about camera and lighting stuff. Screen sharing and collaboration. One of the real benefits about virtual meetings is that, I remember used to sit around this big conference room table and pass a million sheets out. Well, using this virtual technology, a lot of the stuff we can do with just screen sharing and doing edits in a digital format and make things a lot more effective. So there are some benefits here. Structure, format, and command. When we're having a virtual meeting, and we want to make those meetings effective, we can't really operate them necessarily the same way that we would with an in-person meeting. So let's just talk about how we compose ourselves. Setting ground rules and preparation. How do we kick things off and make sure that we're getting a good process out of this? I call this next one etiquette. So what are the things we can do when we're presenting or doing a virtual meeting to make sure that we're not stepping on anybody's toes or lowering the quality of our meeting. A few troubleshooting tips, some common things we hear about, and maybe you have some troubleshooting you'd like to discuss today or get my thoughts on. And then, of course, your Q&A, which is really, as I always say, it's the most important part because it's about you guys. So when it comes to applications, there's really no shortage of applications available to have a virtual meeting, and each one of them has advantages and disadvantages. So I can't possibly go through all the applications today. I'm just going to talk about a few that I'm familiar with, that I see all the time, and perhaps you're using something different. But again, this is about getting you in the mindset of using the right application for the type of meeting. So the first and one of my personal favorites is Microsoft Teams. Microsoft Teams is, at first and foremost, sort of like an instant message chat-based system. And what I like about it is that it really integrates well with the Office 365 platform, any of the Microsoft products. It's really easy to hold virtual meetings. Right before we did this webinar, me and Jill and some of the others on the leadership team at DP Solutions, we had our weekly management meeting where we were all on camera at the same time. We reviewed this big spreadsheet we work on. We had some notes that we wanted to share, and it was really seamless, and we were able to get a lot done in that 1 hour session. But I guess the disadvantage is if you're not a fan of the Microsoft products, or you don't really, feel like maybe you're a Google person, if there is such a thing, it puts you in that Microsoft ecosystem. And there's some other little issues as well. There are limitations on the number of camera views. I know with the next one we're going to get into, Zoom, you've seen the screenshots on the internet where they've got 60 people on camera at the same time, which is not something that Microsoft Teams, I believe, necessarily does right at the moment. Zoom obviously is a different application. It got really popular right at the start of the pandemic. I think a lot of you, if you've been paying attention to the news, you probably saw not only did their stock do really well, but the engagement with their platform went up big time. There's just a lot more people installing and using Zoom. You can get a free version or a paid version, which is really nice. You can sort of dip your toe into Zoom and not really have to make any significant investment. There's a lot of flexibility when it comes to things like rooms and cameras. One thing we do at DP Solutions is we have like a game night where we do it over Zoom, and we did trivia sessions where we would break out into little rooms, and our associate Giselle, she would split some people up into one room and some people up into another room while we would work together and then come back. So that's a really cool Zoom feature, I feel. It's also what advantage or disadvantage, it's its own independent platform. So when you're getting Zoom, you're not getting Zoom and the Office suite with it and all this other stuff. You're really just getting the application itself. There's also been in recent months some security concerns, in particular on the free products. I don't want to dwell on all of that right now, but there were concerns about some of the encryption protocols they were using. And then honestly, some of the performance is a little mixed. One thing I can say about it is Zoom has things like virtual background features. So I could be sitting in front of my webcam, but in the background, you may have seen one of our videos that we did with some of our partners where I was in front of like a white brick wall with DP Solutions in the background, and that was a virtual background, like a virtual green screen. But in order to get good output on that, I need to use my desktop computer, which is a little more powerful and a nicer video card. My laptop just wasn't handling it very well. So Zoom is not, on a performance perspective, the best. I guess that's not a huge surprise considering the amount of bandwidth and video processing it does. But you should just know about that before you start using it. Another tool, and it's the tool we're using today, is GoToMeeting. It's really good for the sort of one-to-many communications like this webinar. I can do a presentation, share it with everybody else. I can get, I think our max attendees on this is 100 something right now. And it's really, really nice for this kind of stuff. And notice we use this. We're not using Zoom. We're not using Teams to do these webinars. We use GoToMeeting. Just a couple personal things that I think about GoToMeeting. It's a little clunky at times. I know in the past I've had weird stuff with it when it comes to, getting my audio right, or, I'll be doing a PowerPoint presentation like this one, and then all of a sudden instead of it sharing the view you're seeing right now, it shows the presenter view with the notes and stuff like that, or I get a pop-up and all of a sudden the share stops working and stuff like that. It's fine, and don't get me wrong, it's not like the worst thing in the world, but it's a little frustrating. And it's also not really much, in my opinion, it's not much of a collaboration tool. I think Microsoft Teams is a much better solution if you say, I want to have this meeting and we're all going to work on this document together. I think Teams is really a lot better for that, in my opinion. And I guess that's one qualification. These are all, for the most part, my opinions, and people will have their own personal preferences. These are the three products I happen to use the most, but there are others out there. Google Hangouts comes to mind. That's also a really nice thing, especially if you're in the Google ecosystem. Skype, which still exists, although it's really being turned into Teams when Microsoft bought it. There's WebEx. There's this Join Me tool. I'm sure I'm forgetting some, but there are a lot of products out there. So really, though, think about what you're looking to accomplish with your meeting or your presentation, and that's going to help you pick the right application. If you have any questions, if you're not sure which one's right, please don't hesitate to shoot us an email or reach out to us. Next, I'm going to pivot to microphones and audio quality. This is something that I'm a big stickler on. So you could really benefit from a decent audio setup. One of the great things is today, especially with modern computers, not even really sophisticated computers, is that you can get a decent audio setup without making a big investment. And so the first thing I'm going to say is that webcam mics stink. If you're using this on a laptop, you might have a little webcam and a tiny little hole on that webcam that is designed to pick up your audio. It may not surprise you that that's not going to be the best and clearest audio. There's also sometimes other built-in mics into computers. They're just not all that good. I recommend not using them if you can. A few good options. One is if you have Bluetooth on your computer, like a inexpensive Bluetooth headset. I believe one I use with my cell phone. They're not quite like Apple AirPods, which are very expensive. These are like generic $20 earbuds that actually have a wire on them, and it gets decent audio for that. You can sound nice and clear, and it won't pick up a lot of external audio. On the computer I'm using right now, I'm using what's called a Blue Snowball mic. I know that's a weird sounding name, but that's what I use. It's a Blue Snowball mic. I got it when I was playing computer games online, and it really works well with this. I even use a little pop filter, so it doesn't come through. In the office, when I would do webinars there, I've been using what's called a Yeti. These are USB microphones that can be hooked up to pretty much any computer. And they usually run you maybe somewhere between maybe $80 or $100. And yeah, that's a little bit of an investment, but I will say, if you're going to do this stuff all the time and you really want to get good audio quality, those microphones make a difference. With my Blue Snowball that I'm using right now, I even have like a little stand that it locks into, so I can sort of hang it over my computer so it doesn't get in the way. So that stuff's really cool too. So consider that sort of thing. You don't have to go crazy with your microphone, but if you're going to do it a lot, consider making an investment in a pretty decent digital tool. One thing that a lot of people don't know about is something called a noise gate. And what a noise gate does is it will set a level to pick up volume before it actually starts outputting that volume to the person on the other end. So as your voice is picked up, it'll get your speech really well, but it won't get maybe your air conditioner noise in the background, or the person outside beeping their horn, or whatever it is. It's only going to pick up your sound because you've set the gate to a certain level so that all that other noise doesn't come out. So this definitely requires a little bit of touch and feel. You're going to want to mess with it, because if you set it too high, then maybe it won't pick up your voice. Maybe your lower tones won't come out that well. If you set it too low, then you're going to just get all that ambient noise. And some microphones, when you do noise gates, it's going to work better with better microphones. So see if you can do that. If you're if you're going to really spend a lot of time doing this, doing a little bit of tweaking will help you out. Another tip, and I see this all the time, in the application you're using, you really need to make sure you select the right microphone. So you hook up this USB microphone to your laptop and you start doing a broadcast or a meeting, and everyone says your audio stinks. And the reason is that the application, instead of using the microphone you just hooked up, it's using a default microphone, which may be your webcam. So you've got this great microphone set up, and yet it's not really turned on. It's using a different microphone. So you want to make sure when you start your meeting or when you're configuring your application that the device settings are correct. And if you need help with that, please feel free to reach out. But this stuff is really not that hard. Depending on the application, it's going to be a little bit different. But once you get it, you sort of get it. Next thing I want to talk about is cameras and lighting. So the little note I put here is, it's best to not look like you're broadcasting from a closet or cave, or if you are, maybe you can hide it. So a few tips here. Built-in laptop webcams often are decent in well-lit rooms, but bad in poor lighting. So, and HD webcams are also not that expensive. So on my laptop, which is a pretty standard Dell laptop, I've got a webcam, a little webcam that's built into the right top monitor. I'm sure many of you have seen these things before. And when I'm in a really well-lit room, I get a pretty clear signal. Maybe not the smoothest picture, but you can see my face pretty well, and things come through pretty well. On my desktop, the one I'm doing right now, and I'm not sharing my camera for this webinar, but I use a 1080p Logitech webcam that I believe I spent $60 for. I use that because I wanted something a little bit better. These cameras tend to do better with white level adjustments, light adjustments. One thing you'll probably see sometimes is windows or light shine through and they'll really put out like big, bright, almost like stars, like halos in your room. And the better the camera is, the less that's going to happen, or at least it won't be as much of a distraction. So consider that. Again, if you're going to be on camera a lot, maybe making an investment in a decent Logitech webcam that does 720p, 1080p resolution, ideally either 60 frames per second video will give you a much better result. But again, it's all depending on what you're trying to get out of your camera situation. If you can, try to have the lighting come from behind the camera so it's illuminating you. So you don't want light coming in from behind you so it looks like you're standing in front of the sun. You want the light coming pointed at you so the camera is seeing this big light around you. And if you have lights that sort of diffuse light in a way that aren't necessarily like, if you think about like a desk lamp, oftentimes those are very directed lights and they shine very brightly on a specific spot. It's really better when you're recording video to get light that sort of goes over a broad area so that you get a nice clear image on that stuff. This is again the type of thing that you're gonna have to mess with and test a little bit, and a lot of it's gonna depend on the room you're recording in, stuff like that. Another tip, and I know I have this issue because I use multiple monitors, is you want to be mindful of your screens. So if you have a screen and on your screen is a sort of white background image, you're going to get a lot of that white light pointed at you from your monitor, and that might wash out. I'm fair skinned, and so sometimes when I get that kind of light, I tend to look a lot brighter and whiter than I am. And for most meetings, it's not a big deal. But if you look really washed out, that might ruin your experience. So be mindful of that. Another tip, outdoor light can be good if it's not too bright. If you check out any of our tech tips videos that we've been doing them outside just to be safe and socially distanced and stuff like that. And we're very mindful about where we set up our camera and things like that, because we want to get good light on me when we record. But we don't want it to be like in the middle of our courtyard where the light is really, really bright, because then it just makes the whole image look not quite as nice. In fact, one of the best times to record video, if you're trying to do this, is on like overcast days. You know, it might be 2 o'clock in the afternoon and it's a little cloudy out, but you're getting this still bright, decent light that isn't like just like that desk lamp that doesn't shine hard on you. So just keep all that stuff in mind. It's lighting and camera stuff is definitely something that you need to adjust and deal with as you go. I'm going to pivot a little bit. We talked a lot about the technical stuff. Let's talk a little bit about screen sharing and collaboration. And one of the best things about virtual meetings is no wasted paper. Again, I remember going to a client meeting and you say, well, how many things do you need? Let's get 10 folders together. And in those folders, we got to staple these 4 sheets together and then have this side of the packet have this, and this side of the packet have that. And don't forget your business cards and stuff. And then you get there and you thought it was going to be 10 people and it's 3 people, and you have all this paper you printed, and it's all kind of lost, especially as people, you know, tend to not need all of that stuff. So almost every application has a screen sharing option, and you really should get yourself familiar with it. In GoToMeeting, like we're doing right now, and really any application, you can pick just a specific application or a specific window in an application. So with this GoToMeeting presentation, I have on my computer I have 2 monitors set up right now, and I have 2 different windows. On one window, I've got the full screen presentation like you're seeing right now. On another screen, I have the presenter view where I have the notes, and I'm only sharing the one screen because that's what makes sense. Microsoft Teams, for just to give you another example, has the option of sharing an entire monitor display. So regardless of what's on the screen or what application you're using, it's just going to show the one monitor. Excuse me. So you can, you know, if you minimize the application, it's going to show whatever is in the background of that application. Maybe it's going to show your desktop. You should get familiar with that sort of thing because you want to make sure if you're sharing something that you're sharing exactly what you want to share and not the wrong things. It may even be a compliance or security concern. Let's say you're doing a presentation for a customer and then you're also working on something that's kind of sensitive. You really don't want to share that stuff. And if you figure out just how to share that one specific application in your virtual meeting app, you'll make sure that you won't have those kinds of unnecessary breaches. Some applications don't like to be captured. So we, you know, another initiative we've been going through is doing, you know, our Tech Academy, where we're sort of teaching people, you know, little tips and tricks about how to use their technology. You should check it out on the website. And sometimes with the tool we're using, which is something called Open Broadcaster software, certain applications just don't want to be captured. Oftentimes it has to do with, I'm not going to get too far into it, but technology designed to avoid copyright issues with videos, stuff like that. If you're planning on sharing something, it really would benefit you to sort of run the application through the ringer a little bit and make sure that it's gonna play nicely before you start doing your actual presentation. A lot of applications allow remote control, so you can pass the editing of a document from like one person to another. Getting back to some of the things we do at DP Solutions, when I was working last week on a script, you know, we had one of our associates is doing like a service delivery type video. We were working on the script together. She presented it in Microsoft Teams, and so we were looking on it together. And then I wanted to make a few changes and write something in, and she wasn't sure what I wanted to do. So I took remote control of her PC and I started typing in what I wanted to do. And that was really helpful. I mean, you can imagine how this could be used in a number of things. Let's say you're working on a contract with a client and you want to get, you want to make some edits to the contract and you're amenable to those changes. You know, rather than say, okay, I'm gonna have to shred this contract and then go back into my word processor and make the change and then print out another version and then send that version over and do all this other stuff. You just make those changes in real time with remote control. So you want to look about how to use that and also make sure, similarly to the screen sharing concerns, that you're not giving people control when they don't deserve it. Learn how applications you want to share utilize the zoom feature to increase text size. So the display I'm using right now is a 2560 by 1440p resolution, so a really high resolution monitor. But when I show, just in our meeting before, when I was showing that spreadsheet, the text looks really, really small when it's first set up. So I have to make sure when I start presenting that I use the zoom feature so that I get a nice clear image for my other colleagues. So learn how to use that. And then again, watch what you share. You really need to make sure that you're not making the wrong clicks. You don't want to share sensitive information instead of a PowerPoint presentation. This is a thing that happens where people overshare and you have this kind of casual sort of data breaches. And unfortunately, there are people who will take advantage of stuff. And we're going to get a little bit into that later in the presentation. Structure, format, and command. So just like a regular meeting, a virtual meeting needs to have some kind of structure and control. We can talk all we want about tech and all the things we do with it, but you know, I actually think because of all the distractions that can be presented with a virtual meeting, you know, pop-ups that show up on your computer, you know, the kids in the background, whatever, virtual meetings kind of invite distraction. So it's really important to think about before you have a meeting what kind of structure you have and have some command at this beginning. So the first thing I would say is to designate a leader of your meeting. Somebody has to keep everybody on task. Even if that leader, all they do is mute microphones or stick to an agenda, it's really important to have someone be in control of that meeting. Otherwise, you're going to run into this constant clashing between attendees. And not on purpose. People don't want to be rude or mean or anything like that. It's just that without that leadership, you're going to have a harder time. Unless it's a webinar like right now, you want to give the audience a chance to breathe or ask questions. So let's say, for the sake of, you know, yesterday I was having a compliance discussion with a client, and they looked to me as the expert on this compliance stuff, and I could go on and on and on and on about what this stuff means. But the reality is that, especially when I'm sharing a screen, I might not see them on the other end. I might not get those social cues on the other end that teach me about how well they're accepting my message or whether they're paying attention or something like that. We don't want anybody railroading these presentations. We want them to be as collaborative as possible. So consider allowing a little bit of time to ask questions. Did you get that? Does that all make sense for you? That sort of thing. Consider your tone. So we want to keep people engaged with our presentation, and poor delivery can impact the message. Sometimes people do this and they don't even intend to do it. I know I do it sometimes, where they start talking and, you know, well, we're going to talk about compliance and this is this and blah, 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 and they talk and they speak in a very monotone voice. And, you know, that might be the way they talk. But it's really important, if we're going to do a virtual meeting or we're going to present something, that we try and have a good positive energy. And if you don't have a good delivery, it can impact your message, fair or unfair. So I think it's really important to be cognizant of how you come across when you're talking on a virtual meeting, or if you're recording a video or something like that. It's something that I know I've had to work on. I think I do a pretty good job with it, but I know even still, you know, Giselle in particular really gives me good feedback about how my tone needs to adjust. You probably want to limit your meetings to an hour if you can, or some kind of regular breaks. These meetings can kind of be fatiguing, and staring at a screen too long can be tough. You know, sometimes I know you'd sit around a conference table and you could have a 2 or 3 hour meeting and use a whiteboard or something like that. And maybe that energy of being in an open air or people, maybe standing up, walking around, or not even necessarily looking at their screens the whole time. Sometimes that's not so bad. But if you have a meeting that's like 2 or 3 hours long and people are forced to sit in their desk chairs or whatever, you don't have the same kind of energy. So consider maybe even breaks if you need to have long meetings, or mix it up somehow. Do things that can keep things fresh as you go. So just keep that in mind. There's definitely an energy that comes with using too much time. If you're not going to use a webcam, you should consider things like systems where people announce themselves before they talk. I've been on some big webinars where you might have 100 people on the line, and you don't know who's going to be chiming in on this webinar. And so you'll say, hey, Ben Schmerler, DP Solutions, I just wanted to ask about this. Another way of doing it, these people have interesting things to say, but we don't know who they are. Another way of doing it is maybe saying, hey, if you have a question, type in the chat first if you have a question, and then we'll call on you or something like that. You want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to be heard and that they who's talking. We sometimes lose that in virtual meetings. Let's talk real briefly about ground rules and preparation. So it's a really good idea to keep in mind what kind of meeting we're having and if anybody is in quote charge. Now, as I just said, they should be in charge at these meetings. When you decide you're going to have a virtual meeting, I think it's super important to make it clear what kind of meeting you're having, what you're looking to go over, and the amount of time you need to accomplish your goals. Maybe even step it out and say we're going to spend 10 minutes on topic A, 20 minutes on topic B, and 5 minutes on topic C, so that you have some kind of prep and structure. Again, there's a lot of room for these virtual meetings for things to kind of go off the rails with all the distractions and the lack of physical presence. So I think agendas are really important. I mean, they're great to have anyway in any kind of meeting, but I think agendas take extra importance when you're doing things virtually. For leaders, I always recommend logging in a few minutes early to get prepared. Before I do a webinar or before I have our management meeting, which I try to sort of steer the ship on, I get the stuff I want to share, all those documents open before the meetings, before I even open my application, my meeting application. If I'm sharing something, I want people to log in and see the thing on their screen right as they log in. I don't want them to see some blank screen. Okay, well, let me pull it up. I don't want that to happen. I want it to be, okay, we're starting the meeting at 11 a.m. and you've logged in, and now we have everything ready. We should be ready to go. There's a lot of opportunity, I think, with these virtual meetings for things to get started late just because of little, lack of preparation stuff. Send out meeting confirmations and make sure agendas are agreed upon in advance. Invites end up in spam filters, miscommunications happen. Again, there's with the lack of physical presence, I think sometimes people tend to just forget stuff, or they lose their focus on the meeting, or they forget that they had this meeting, or they scheduled a week ago and they just said, oh, I have this meeting today, I totally forgot, or I just saw it on my calendar a moment ago. Really important to do that. Another thing I didn't write on here, but it's really important, is the thing I mentioned before. Especially when you're a leader, make sure that your mic and camera setup and all this other stuff is done early on. So before we started the webinar today, I have my headphones on, so I don't have audio interference. More on that in a moment. And I had my screen share set up, but I asked Jill, hey Jill, how is my audio sound? Am I coming through? Can you talk a little bit into the mic so I can hear how you're sounding? So that, again, there's no question that at 11 a.m. when we're starting, that I'm able to get my point across. Etiquette. So maybe, I don't know if etiquette's maybe the best word, but let's just give you a few tips to help with professionalism and courtesy on virtual meetings. You know, things that are going to, these are sort of soft things that can be done that can help make the experience better. Mute the mic. You've probably heard, just like on our broadcast, we're muting everybody before we start. But if you're going to have an actual meeting where you're collaborating with people, really only the only person who needs to have their microphone on is the person speaking at the moment. So learn that mute button. Sometimes it's a click. Sometimes you can make it so that you have sort of push to talk. So like if you hold down the space bar or some other button, depending on the application, that is what turns your microphone on. It's really helpful. You don't want to have a bunch of background noise just from somebody's open mic. This is again where the noise gate helps too. Is even if you do have your microphone hot, if you have a noise gate, maybe that little bit of interference won't even come through. I mentioned this earlier. Consider the chat feature to type questions if a lot of people are on the call to avoid the inevitable interruptions. I listen to a lot of podcasts, and what's always funny is when these podcasts are done via Zoom or something like that, you have people stepping on each other's toes, and on a podcast, it's just funny. But when you're having a meeting, you want to kind of avoid that stuff. It's really more important too when you have, the bigger the meeting gets, the more useful these sort of chat features are helpful. Not just that, but I mean, you can use chat features for other things. You can share that link to this thing that you think the group's going to enjoy. You can, maybe if you're a goofball, you can share a picture of a GIF or something like that to have a little fun with your meeting. So consider using chat. I mean, I think it's really underutilized, and we should be using all the tools available to us right now. Headphones are also helpful to reduce feedback. So everyone's heard the horrible echo that happens sometimes on presentations. Oftentimes it's because they're using like desktop speakers or laptop speakers to hear what the other person's saying. And what then happens is that audio goes back into their microphone, and then you have this weird echoey stuff, or God forbid, the really bad feedback that hurts your ears. Just even a pair of earbuds that you can plug into your computer. If you're going to have a meeting, really, I would recommend that, to have some kind of headphones ready to reduce that feedback. It really goes a long, long way to make the audio sound better. Here are a few common issues that I see people having who run virtual meetings. So the most common one is an unstable internet connection. I'll be honest, these platforms have been really solid. I can't say that everything is perfect. It's not like Teams or Zoom or any of these things have been 100% perfect platforms since the pandemic started, but these things have been surprisingly resilient. We have not seen, a week of outage for Microsoft Teams or something like that. Usually when people have issues, it's because their Wi-Fi is bad in their house, or their internet connection is insufficient, or just flaky. It's just not working properly. So if you see poor video quality, a lot of times it's because there's not adequate bandwidth in place. You might even need to see what other people in your home are doing, or maybe if your kids are both watching 4K video, well, they're going to be chewing up a lot of bandwidth while you're trying to have your meeting. So be mindful of that. I said time and time again, check your device settings. Make sure you're using the right webcam. Make sure you're using the right microphone when you're broadcasting, so that you're not picking up, so you're using the right tools and the right devices. Sometimes it gives like weird options too. Like I have a video capture card on my computer, and sometimes for whatever reason, Microsoft Teams says, "Oh, your webcam is your video capture card." And it's like, well, no, it's not. That's not what we're trying to do. Sometimes, and this isn't all that common, but there are occasions where network settings or firewall policies block specific traffic. This is why I think it's important, if you're going to use a platform regularly, do some mock meetings. Try and test all this stuff in advance before you settle on a platform, because you don't know any of these things are going to work before you try them, and you might discover things that you didn't expect. So in conclusion, this stuff's here for the foreseeable future. I would expect, even, let's say we get through this pandemic and things are back to quote unquote normal. I think there are a lot of benefits from virtual meetings, and reducing commuting time and travel time, especially if the meeting can be done virtually, is something that will probably continue into the future, even if it's maybe not quite as much as we're doing right now. I think that this is a new part of the way we work. They don't quite have the same personal touch. Obviously, you can't shake somebody's hand. It's harder to look someone in the eye and things like that. But there are significant technology and cost advantages here. It's much easier, just as a basic example, it's much easier to work on a document together in a virtual meeting than it is to do it in a boardroom. I just think that's a fact. When you consider how much room you have to edit and manipulate, zoom in, zoom out, all that other stuff. So it really benefits us as professionals to master this tool. Many are still novices when it comes to virtual meetings, and it really doesn't have to be that way. We should all be experts. It's not that hard. The technology is available to us, and it can all be achieved. We just have to embrace it, engage with it, and learn it. This isn't as complicated as setting up a home network. It's not as complicated as configuring the video settings on a television, or coding or database or any of that stuff. This is stuff that anybody who has a computer can learn how to do. You can make some very small investments in tech along with some simple best practices and really improve the general quality of your meetings. And I'd love it if everybody who's on this call today leaves here, gets one or two things, and just sees an immediate improvement to the way they do meetings. So that'd be great. And anyway, that's it. We're gonna pivot to Q&A, and while people are getting their questions in, I just want to mention, so we're gonna do like a weird kind of hybrid webinar next month, like sort of a technology town hall. You may remember a couple months ago we did one of these where we took your questions in advance and addressed them in the presentation. So check out the link, dpsolutions.com/webinar/remote-business, and register, submit any questions you have. We have some prepared content that we're going to talk about in terms of running your business in a remote world, but we want to ultimately address what your concerns are. So make sure you get your questions in, and we'll make sure we address everything we possibly can. It's really important to us that we hear your thoughts, that we're addressing your concerns. And with that, I'm going to pivot back to Jill, and I'm going to see what questions we have.
Okay, great. Thanks, Ben. And thanks for mentioning the webinar. Like I said, we really want to get your questions. So when you register, there's a little box where you can enter any of your questions that you have. And we'll be sure to have experts on the line that can answer those. Okay, so we did have a question come in during the presentation, Ben. How does the facilitator problem solve for others on the call, such as finding out which attendee is posing an audio interference?
You're gonna have to figure it out. I mean, it's not necessarily the easiest thing in the world. I think one thing you can do is, if you're gonna have a big meeting and you're not sure, you're worried about this concern, is maybe communicate the expectations up front when you're setting up the agenda of the meeting. Hey, we're gonna have this meeting. Here's what I want you to do when you connect. I want all your mics to be muted. We're gonna do questions via chat first, and then I'll call on you as those questions get in order in the queue. When the issues start happening, don't be afraid as the leader to speak up and say, hey, I'm really getting a lot of feedback. Can we make sure everybody has their microphone muted? I think it's really a lot of that upfront communication can help avoid these issues. Obviously, they're not entirely unavoidable. We're having this very webinar today because these issues do come up. I'm very sympathetic. But I think if you communicate what these expectations are and give some of these tips up front, you may have better engagement moving forward, and maybe have a few less of these issues.
Okay, great. Yeah, I know that can be hard to do, but that's why I say in the beginning, hey, where everyone's muted, just to cut down on any background noise. So that's kind of how we answer for that. Okay, Another question came in. Are there any types of meetings that would not work well in a virtual setting?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's going to be limitations to what we can do virtually. Just to give an example, we had a potential client who wanted to see our facility and do a tour. Yeah, you could do virtual tours. You know, I could walk around with a camera and show off all this stuff, but you know, that touch and feel you can't quite get from a virtual meeting. It's not exactly the same. Same for things like, you know, I've done virtual happy hours and stuff like that, and they're fun. And I've seen some really creative use of virtual happy hours and virtual game nights and stuff like that. Um, but I mean, look, I mean, if you're trying to play a board game, and part of the fun of playing a board game is rolling the dice and pulling up cards and stuff like that, you know, the physical touch of it, you can't quite get that. But I mean, I'm a pretty strong believer that for the vast majority of things we meet for, we can do them remotely. It's not to say we should always do them remotely, but a lot of these tasks we can get done remotely. So I'm very optimistic about this, and but I can see why there's going to be, once things are a little bit more safe and back to normal, why, there's still going to be reasons to have the physical traditional meetings, and I just think we could have a little bit more balance, I guess.
Yeah, that certainly makes sense. Okay, another question is, what are some common security issues with virtual meetings?
The biggest security issue I can think of is the sort of social engineering slash eavesdropping of virtual meetings. You know, consider things like roll calls. Make sure you're aware in your platform about how you can see who's actually in the meeting at any given time, like your attendee list or invite list, depending on what the application is. And you can see who's actually connected on the line. If I get a link to a meeting and I click on that link, I'm in as that person. And so roll calls are good. If you're going to have a meeting with a bunch of people and you're going to talk about something sensitive, maybe consider requiring webcams being on, at least at the beginning, where you say, okay, well, we're having a 10-person discussion and we're talking about the financials of the business, and we don't want anybody to see this stuff. Just as a one example, I want to see everyone's cameras right now, so we could be sure that it's you seeing it and not some bad guy who wants to steal our information. That's a really big issue. Another issue is using the wrong platform for the meeting. So if you are discussing something highly sensitive, you need to be mindful of the security protocols of the platform. So I wouldn't use a free version of Zoom to discuss, national secrets. This is, maybe I'm being a little abstract here, but I wouldn't. I would be very mindful of that stuff. If you're going to do something sensitive, you probably need to be on a paid platform with a company that attests to their security protocols, outlines them, gets audited, things like that. But the biggest one, and it's already happening, is the eavesdropping piece, which is something we should really try to avoid. It's another way of, I talk about phishing a lot. This is not quite like phishing, but it's definitely social engineering. It's the type of thing that happens when people spy on information in like a Starbucks.
Okay, good stuff. Our next question is about regulations. I work in a regulated industry. Are there any compliance measures I need to take for virtual meetings?
Yeah, excellent question. The first is you have to scrutinize the vendor that's providing. I mentioned this a little bit before. You have to scrutinize the vendor that's providing the platform for you to run your meeting through. So if you're going to use a Zoom or Microsoft Teams, these are well-established companies, and especially on their paid versions and the more sophisticated versions that they offer, they're going to have things like highly encrypted transmission. They're going to have things like password protection to log in, or some kind of multi-factor authentication to log in and confirm identities. That's really important. The thing I mentioned before about knowing how to share your screen properly and make sure that you're only sharing the thing you intend to share and nothing else is really critical, because now we're getting into behavioral stuff. If If I have the ability to share my screen and I decide to share the wrong thing, I don't know what I'm doing, and I click the wrong application window, that's on me. That's on me as the person presenting. It's not a problem that, Microsoft didn't do something wrong, Zoom didn't do something wrong. That's on me for being not attentive enough and sharing the wrong thing. Just like it would be stupid to leave the sensitive information, sitting on a printer that we just printed out while someone could just walk up and take it. These are very similar concerns. It's just applied to something different. Another tip I mentioned before: consider the roll call, consider the webcam stuff so you can verify attendance and stuff like that. Very critical. A lot of this stuff is going to depend on the compliance standard, what you're looking to protect. So the answer can be different based on who you are. But I would 100% be very mindful of the things I mentioned before if you're in a compliance-based industry.
Absolutely. Okay, we had one more question. Do you think virtual meetings will remain popular even after the restrictions of the pandemic are lifted?
Yes, I 100% think so. Maybe I'm wired a little bit different from everybody else, so obviously this is all my opinion, but I enjoy doing virtual meetings. I find them to be very useful. I feel like I can get more done in virtual meetings. It's not, we're located, I live in Towson, Maryland. Our office is in Columbia, Maryland. I've done a lot of meetings around the 495 corridor, and I don't have to tell any of you who are familiar with the area that traffic is not fun. I don't love driving from Baltimore to maybe the 495 corridor and then leave at 5 o'clock and sit through 2 hours of traffic. That's not fun for me, especially if the meeting can be done virtually. And now it's not to say I won't do it or I haven't done it. Of course I'll do it. But it's a lot nicer if I can have a really productive meeting without having to waste a bunch of time. That we basically have an equal amount of every day, and when we're spending it sitting in our cars or flying across the country or whatever, that's just lost productivity time. I value the time that I have to relax and rest, and if I could spend half of the time I spend commuting doing meetings and being productive, I tend to feel better. So I think this stuff is here to stay, and I think we're better for it. There's so many benefits. Again, I don't think I don't want to be an extremist here. I don't think we abandon physical meetings, but I do think that maybe we did a few too many things with these physical meetings that we could have done using our technology.
Yeah, and to that end, one of our viewers commented, "Thank you for your help. Very informative. We've been able to include staff statewide that we couldn't do very easily before." It's a very good point.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big believer over this whole thing that obviously there are a lot of negatives from the pandemic, and I don't want to minimize them. A lot of people are impacted very negatively. A lot of businesses have been impacted in ways that are catastrophic even. But I also believe that we should be looking for the positives in this. And what are the ways we can grow as individuals? How can we be more productive? Some of the worst things that have happened in this country, think about, World War II, for example, a terrible toll in terms of death and loss of money and things like that. But also you had an industrial, we already had the industrial revolution, but you have industrial growth from this stuff. And I would hope that from COVID-19 that we would find that we all become a little bit more skilled, that we grow personally. Actually, I was just talking on the call before, we were talking about our town hall. One of the things I'm going to talk about is I'm learning to cook more, which is silly, like maybe it's a small thing, but there are positives to be gained, and adversity does lead to growth. And so I'm a big believer in that.
Excellent. Yeah. Okay. I don't see any more questions coming in, so I think we can go ahead and wrap up.
Yeah. Thanks everybody for joining us. Really hope you guys can attend the next webinar we have. Please don't hesitate to visit our site or contact us if you need more information. We really want to put out stuff out there and give you guys all the information you need.